From Eyewitness News, this is Newsmakers.
As soon as he walked into the room, FBI agent Robert Fitzpatrick knew James J. Whitey Bulger was no good. But no one listened, and as we now all know, Bulger remained a top echelon informant for the FBI, given a frightening free pass to commit heinous crimes while being handled by now incarcerated and corrupt former agent John Connolly. There have been many books written about Bulger, who was finally captured after years on the lam, but none from the perspective of a federal agent who tried to stop the monster known as Whitey. He wasn't just fighting the Boston gangster, but the Department of Justice itself. This week on Newsmakers, authors of the new book Betrayal, Providence writer John Land, and former veteran FBI agent Robert Fitzpatrick.
Good morning. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Joining me on the panel, Eyewitness News analyst Arlene Violet and WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Bob,
Good
John,
morning.
thank you very much for joining us. Congratulations first on the book. John, Bob, great read. It's not just about Whitey Bulger. I found that it's a nice history of organized crime in New England. Bob, I want to start with you. The centerpiece of the book, and we touched on it there in the open, you recommended that Whitey Bulger be dropped as a top echelon informant for the FBI, and there's a really gripping chapter in the book, and I'd like to hear you talk about it right now. The day you met Bulger at his Quincy condo to assess him as an FBI agent, informant.
That was an interesting day, to say the least. One of my subordinates, John Morris, who was actually John Connolly's supervisor and was the guy in charge of the organized crime section here. He and I were driving out to Bulger. In fact, he was taking me out there. And what's interesting is, all the way out there, he's telling me what a great guy Bulger is. Now, I had done some reviews, I had looked at the stuff, and obviously I knew he was a bad guy, and I knew he was involved in a whole bunch of stuff. But to call him a real nice guy, a good guy, I had my reservations, but he kept on, and at some level, it just began to be too much. But anyway, we get out there, he parks the car, I get out, and I walk into the Quincy condo. And of course, knock on the door, Bulger comes, and I put my hand out there, and he just ignores it. And I say to myself, you know, I mean, this guy's our informant? Oh, okay. Then I follow him in. We walk into a rather dark condo, if you will. He goes into the kitchen area, goes behind the section there that I consider to be an obstacle, if you will. He stands behind it and he does one of these. The other thing I noticed right out of the gate is he has a baseball cap on with sunglasses. And I'm saying,
in a dark room.
Okay. Yeah. And as I'm there, it's dark inside, and my eyes are just adjusting. And of course, we start the conversation. While I'm into the interrogation, or into assessing him, which is the reason I'm there, to try to find out who is this guy, who is Bulger, this guy who's become the top informant in the office, a TE, top echelon, and he's the guy who's supposed to give us the mafia. So I'm there and I'm talking to him when all of a sudden, in the right-hand side, John Connolly, one of my agents, pops out.
Was he supposed to be there?
He's not supposed to be there. And I'm like astounded, and I actually getting kind of angry that he's there, because this is supposed to be a one-on-one. I'm supposed to be assessing Bulger mano a mano and asking him questions that are, quite frankly, confidential, and was supposed to be confidential. And then as I turn, I see a woman on the left-hand side, and she's smoking, and I had smelled the smoke, and I'm looking over there, and all of a sudden I'm saying to myself, viscerally, you know, uh-oh, you know, this is supposed to be a very confidential thing, and this guy's got witnesses, is the way I immediately looked at it. Connolly jumped out and said, "Hi, Fitzy," or "Hi, Bob," I forget the exact thing, and I kind of looked at him, but anyway, I went on with the interview. And part of the interview, it was about a half-hour interview, and I actually terminated it because during the interview, I began to have reservations about this person. He was not the nice guy, first of all. And in one area, I said to him, look, Whitey, you're the informant. You're the one that's supposed to give us the information. And at that, he bristled. I mean...
Well, you were calling him a rat.
Well, right. Well, figuratively, yes. Not actually a rat. I said...
But in his world, that's exactly what you were doing.
Yeah. And you're a tout, you're a tout, you're a tout in that world. And so, yeah, it was an acknowledgement that he was a snitch, better word, and that he had been snitching. But this confrontation drew out, I believe, an anger that I began to see right away.
Was it different? You'd had a lot of experience by then in the FBI. Was it different from anything you'd experienced?
Good point, good point. Yes, first of all, I taught about informants at the FBI Academy. And one of the things I taught about was how to develop an informant, how to not get close to an informant, not let the informant take you over, and also to assess the informant in terms of direction, making sure the informant does what you want the informant to do, not what the informant wants to do.
You wrote that he reminded you a little bit of James Earl Ray, the man who killed Martin Luther King Jr. Why is that?
Well, in my early career, I had been stationed in Memphis, Tennessee. And I was a night supervisor, actually what they call relief supervisor for the SAC, the special agent in charge. And so I had been assigned to watch Martin Luther King, Dr. King, when he was in Memphis. And so every day for about a week, I would go to the Lorraine Motel, actually behind it, and I would watch what was going on, mostly in a form of protection, but also to understand who was there, who's around there. And what happened, of course, was about 4:30 in the afternoon, I got a call from the office that Dr. King had been shot. Well, I was like right on the scene. I ran back, and as I was running back, the TAC team, the Memphis TAC team was coming up. And Zachary, Captain Zachary, one of the leaders of the Memphis PD, and I charged in. We ran up the stairs with our guns out. And of course, we're looking for the perpetrator, for the perp, as they say. And we were interviewing people along the way. Interestingly, that house that we were in was a transient house, and most of the people were drunk, quite frankly. They were dead drunk, and we weren't getting the information we wanted. We found the room that he was allegedly in, and we examined the room. We got some evidence right off the bed. As I went back down the stairs to chase him, if you will, because we're 5 minutes into this, and as I'm going down the stairs, I see in the alcove of the building a bedspread, and as I pull it back, there's a rifle, a bunch of other evidence. We grab one of the locals, one of Zachary's men. We put him on it, and we do our investigation.
But the point of the two, James Earl Ray, Whitey Bulger, we drawing a line to a stone-cold killer here?
Well,
to a sociopath?
What happens later, I go to Brushy Mountain Prison to interview James Earl Ray, and I get this attitude again that, you know, he's just not going to cooperate.
He's the alpha male.
Exactly.
Yeah, let's talk about the FBI. I mean, in 1981, the Massachusetts superintendent of police is telling you, Bulger's a bad guy, he doesn't trust Morris.
Colonel O'Donovan.
Colonel O'Donovan. He doesn't trust Morris, he doesn't trust, you know, certainly Conley.
Doesn't trust the FBI?
He doesn't trust the FBI, and you're there to, you know, investigate this. After, it was the agency, the FBI, just sclerotic. William Weld, you know, turns you down. Session gives you orders, don't pursue an investigation. Was that corruption, stupidity, just win at all costs against the mafia and let the Irish mafia do whatever they want? What do you attribute that stonewalling to?
Okay, I'm going to jump ahead just a little. Basically, this turned out to be a rogue agent situation. That Conley was the bad guy, that he was the guy that did it, and so forth. As I got into my stuff, I found out that it wasn't just Conley.
Right.
It wasn't just Morris. I found out that it went into the strike force. And I had been warned, about a year or two into the investigation, that there were informants, or there were actually rogue informants working for the bad guys that were actually strike force people. And when I braced Jerry O'Sullivan, who was the strike force chief, I told him, I said, look, you got bad people in here. You got
You
people.
think he's a bad person, too. I mean, he
Well,
didn't do what
later
he
on-
should have done, right? I mean,
later on, well, yes.
Yeah.
Well,
But so just looking at it now, okay, was the agency really corrupt or had corrupted attitudes, if not actual, criminally corrupt, or was it just, sclerotic, or was it
No.
just protect yourself at all costs when you make a mistake? What
I
was going
eventually
on?
tagged my boss as the leak. That's corruption. That's, right there. That should have been settled right then and there. You don't turn in your SAC for criminal action and not have something done. When that wasn't done,
So
I
just
got
quickly,
scared, to be honest
here you
with
were over here with Lincoln Almond, right, for a year? You came to Providence,
Yeah, in
right?
Providence,
Did
sure.
you ever say to him after you got stonewalled in Boston, Mr. Almond, you don't know how bad this is, can you try to intervene with William Webster, who was then the, J. Edgar Hoover of the day? There's something rotten in Boston, help me out, or did you not
On the
bring it up to
contrary,
him?
he grabbed me
Yeah.
and told me that there was corruption.
Link Almond did?
Lincoln?
And what did he do about it?
Well, that's, that's
question.
the whole issue. One of the things, when he was telling me about the corruption, I sat there and I said, sir, you're the
boss.
United States Attorney. And you're asking me, I'll look
To
into
your
it.
knowledge, he did nothing?
Do I what?
To your knowledge, did Lincoln Almond not do anything?
I can't say whether he did anything
But
or not, but to my knowledge, no.
John, Bob, I've talked to, former and current FBI agents. They're not all sending Bob Fitzpatrick a Christmas card. There are a lot of agents that do not like Bob Fitzpatrick. Did you have any reservations going into this project about his take on the story, and how much vetting did you have to do on the information that he was giving you when you tackled this project? And we should point out, you've written 30 novels. This is your first true crime, and what a heck of a tale to pick to be your first
to
true
start,
crime.
Truth is stranger than fiction.
Often it is. So any reservations about Bob's story and maybe some of the pushback that he might have gotten from some of his colleagues?
A couple thoughts. First off, the most important answer to the question is the truth is the best defense. I believed what Bob was saying was true. I didn't know all the details. I had read Black Mass. I hadn't read The Brothers Bulger. I didn't remember a lot of it when I first met Bob. I believed he was telling the truth. I believed that someone with his experience, this is a man who turned the informant in Mississippi during the Mississippi burning case that ultimately got the FBI Sam Bowers in the biggest civil rights case of all time. This is the man, as you heard, who found the gun that killed James Earl Ray, the evidence that
Martin Luther
King, that ultimately convicted and led to the arrest of James Earl Ray in London. This is a man who ran Abscan in the Miami office of the FBI, the biggest case of public corruption. While he was in Miami, very few people know this, he also uncovered arguably the greatest case of corruption in the history of municipal law enforcement, the Miami River murders, where Miami cops were being hired as hitmen and drug dealers by the cartel. 220 were fired, 20 went to jail. Credibility was there, so I believed him. But that said, I also knew there'd be pushback. There'd be the FBI term being blowback. That people would look for a reason to disavow what he was saying, and that's what I was saying.
So that begs the question, have you felt any of that yet? I know the book only came out on the 3rd. So
Give it time.
Give it time,
Give it time.
maybe, but have you gotten any of that blowback yet?
No, because you know what? Everything that Bob is claiming in this book is corroborated in the endnotes. The most salacious, the claims that when you read them, you go, this can't possibly be. This couldn't have happened. If I had written this as a novel, my editors would have sent it back to me and said, this is too unbelievable to believe. And what I thought recently, you say this can't happen. And I look at the Penn State scandal. It's the same story. It's the same thing. You have people in power who know something is going on, and either they deny or they cover up. And they knew about it at Penn State in '98. They did nothing.
Well,
they knew about
church,
it the Catholic Church in Boston.
In Boston.
It's the same thing. It's a cycle. So how does it happen? It's all. Why do I believe it? Why is it very difficult to refute? Because there is a culture of corruption that, in those two examples and in the FBI, where it's the cover-up that is worse than the crime.
Right.
And that's exactly what happened there.
Gentlemen, we have to take a break. When we come back, here's a bizarre one for you. John Connolly wears a pink tuxedo to this guy's wedding. The book is called Betrayal. The author is John Land, and former FBI agent Bob Fitzpatrick. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. To my right, Ted Nesi and Arlene Violet. Our guests this week, the authors of the new book, Betrayal, fantastic book, John Land, Providence author, and former FBI agent Robert Fitzpatrick. I want to ask you briefly about something I said going into the break. You did not trust John Connolly. You thought he was a braggart. You thought he was cocky, loose with protocol, deceptive, and a bully. Why was he at your wedding?
Well, that's an interesting point. We actually worked together. I mean, working the organized crime, working the mafia, working non-traditional organized crime, the wise guys and so forth. We naturally worked a whole bunch of other things which made us friends. I mean, we talk about the cases, we talk about this, we talk about that. And so in inviting Morris, his boss, to the wedding, it was only right that I would take Connolly, who was hand in glove, if you will.
Do you think he was treated unfairly? He sits in a prison cell right now. He did some time in Massachusetts. Now he's doing some time for murder. Do you think he deserved what he got?
Tim, I think I've said I don't believe in a rogue agent theory. I believe this was a systematic breakdown of the criminal justice system. In that regard, he deserved probably the first 10 years that he got. In fact, he served 10 full years. I think if you check records, you'll find out not everybody does that. Now he's been convicted of a crime of killing, of actually being involved in Callahan's killing and so forth. And he wasn't there during that period. He was at Harvard University, and he was attaining his master's degree. And as such, he wasn't in the office. He wasn't privy to all the stuff that was going on. So when I was grabbing Callahan to interview, because Holleran had already been shot and killed, so he was my next guy. And when I'm getting ready to grab him, I'm working with Morris around all this stuff. So it's Morris who has almost all the information, not Connolly.
Well, let's.
And if anybody's going to snitch on anybody, you know, I can't say that Morris didn't snitch. And I don't know how far that was gone into.
Well, that kind of goes to my question, which was obviously Whitey's now sitting in prison. We're waiting for the trial to see how that rolls forward. And I'm just wondering, sort of, what do you expect to happen with it? Do you think they could come to a plea bargain or something to get him to talk? Do you think the FBI is nervous about what he might say on the stand?
How can you plea bargain with
44
Whitey?
murders.
Yeah, I mean, more than 4 murders. He's probably good for about 19.
44.
Okay.
Directly into it.
Right. Amen. And granted, now I have to say something now. Remember, these are alleged. The guy's never been convicted.
Yep.
So we're going to be careful around that issue. But there's been enough testimony against him by the rifleman, Fleming, by Martorano, the hitman, you know, all these
really
like the
upstanding
animal
guys, though.
Yeah.
These are people that have lied on the stand.
Wow. Great point. Great point. And I think most people agree with that you're talking about people who perjured themselves in the past, and that's been codified. And now they're getting on the bus. Let me use that word a very famous way. Now people get on the bus to get off the bus, and we don't know how much of that is actually.
But do you think
it.
Whitey has stories left to tell that people might think this whole story has been told? Your book's out. The Globe writes about it ad nauseum. You know, do you think he has things left to say that they'd be worried about on the stand?
Yeah. In a nutshell? Yeah.
Here's a culture question, okay? I noticed you were getting your loggerheads, you know, in the FBI system. Did you ever think, as an FBI guy, maybe I should try the state side? Let's go over to Frank Bellotti, who was then the Attorney General at the time, or, you know, culture-wise, would that have been such a verboten thing to do? You never even consider saying, nothing's happening here, let me see if Bellotti will do something.
It's a great point you just made. First of all, let me reiterate. Informants were sacrosanct. You could not talk about informants. You don't talk to anybody about informants. It's all inside. For me to go outside and talk to a guy like Bellotti or anybody
You
else.
could talk to Bellotti about your agents. You could say the corruption of Morris and Connolly, and that the guy Opie, for example, certainly knew who he had talked to about getting, and then the guy's rubbed out as an informant, etc. I mean, that kind of stuff. An attorney general wouldn't have to ask you about the informants. You could deal with the agent Opie and then go after those agents potentially.
But again, it's a fluid situation. There's a lot of stuff sub rosa, and there's so much stuff going on. I have to impart to you that I had 5 different. I had white collar crime, public corruption. I had non-traditional organized crime. I had labor racketeering, and I can go on. Whitey wasn't my only case.
Yeah, I understand. John, did your view of law enforcement change after you finished writing this book with Bob?
That's a great question, and the answer is yes. I mean, Bob Fitzpatrick recommended in March of 1981 that Whitey Bulger be closed to informant, targeted, and arrested.
Yeah.
Colonel O'Donovan had done the same thing even before the famous Lancaster garage incident, where all of a sudden everybody stopped talking after he. But to answer the question specifically, after Bob recommended Bulger's closing, he took allegedly killed a minimum of 12 people, including the 2 Deborahs, 2 women. When people speak about Bulger and they talk about him as the guy who gave out Thanksgiving turkeys, and he only killed bad guys. Robin Hood. And we glorify the Bob. We glorify these guys. But the bottom line is, he strangled 2 women.
Right.
Innocent women for no other reason than he was jealous. This is not a good person. This is a bully. This is a braggart. This is a cold-blooded killer that the FBI left out there. They actually, unwittingly or not, they emboldened him, and they were his accomplice and his accessory in his rise to the head of a criminal enterprise in New England.
Let's talk about the mob of today. When you were in the Boston office, Bob, there were some rising stars in the world of organized crime around here. Luigi Baby Shack's Minacchio had just returned from a decade on the run, and Robert DeLuca was inducted in that now famous 1989 induction ceremony in Medford, Massachusetts that was caught on a wiretap. What were your impressions of them now, and what's your assessments of them then, and what are your assessments of them now?
Of the old
Minacchio and DeLuca specifically.
Well, they were bad guys then, and of course they're suffering from that bad guy reputation now. I don't know.
Did you deal with them at all?
Did I what?
Did you deal with them? Did any of the cases intersect with?
In the sense that I dealt with the whole organized crime program. I can't sit here and tell you I filtered out each one, but of course I recognize the names, DeLuca and so forth. And he's out there now, and I'm sure he's
he's not out there right now, DeLuca.
No, I mean, when I say he's out there, he's free walking around, and I'm sure he's thinking about that, and I'm sure people back at the FBI and the Justice Department are thinking about him, because he was an integral part of that situation. So I'm sure he's going to be interviewed and looked at in terms of what he remembers. Now, whether he'll be a witness or not, I quite frankly...
Well, that's the big question right now, as to whether or not he's cooperating with law enforcement. John, I loved the opening chapter on it, and
God.
It talks about the murder, the really graphic murder of John McIntyre. What made you decide to start the story here?
That is such a great question. That was not the original opening. For the first 9 or 10 drafts of the book, we had an entirely different opening. When Forge bought the book, my company, Bob Gleason, the editor, said, we need to start with Bulger. We need to start with the antagonist to show what Fitzpatrick was up against. So I chose the most dramatic scene to illustrate the kind of man that Bulger was. He didn't just kill this kid. He tortured him first.
Right.
Even after he knew he had gotten everything out of John McIntyre. He did it because he liked it. And I think one of my favorite lines in the book
is the opening line.
Is the opening line, you want a bullet in the head, which has actually been testified to, but the last line, after it was over, he went up and took a nap.
Yeah.
That was Whitey Bulger. That scene is it typifies the maelstrom of what Bob Fitzpatrick was walking into. when he came to Boston.
You end up testifying in this McIntyre civil trial. I have a question. The book talks about how you were in an orphanage in New York, and we only have about a minute left in the program. I apologize. You and the other kids would never rat out on the other bad seeds, the facility. And you wrote about having to hold on to the steam pipes until your hands blistered, and you would never give it up. Was there that kind of inner battle before testifying about bad agents? I mean, you were diming out the agency in many ways, and we have 30 seconds. I apologize.
Right, Tim, and not just that, but the code of the FBI is really loyalty. And some people, unfortunately, see it as disloyal to testify. I saw it as an oath. I took an oath.
Did you feel the heat on your hands from the steam pipes?
Oh, yeah. I felt being back at the institution. I mean, there were 1,000 kids in a home. And all of us always thought about where we were and who we are. And so we felt under the gun. I also felt under the gun later on. I had that feeling again.
Bob Fitzpatrick, John Land, congratulations on the book. It's called Betrayal, a wonderful story on Whitey Bulger, the inside story. For Ted Nesi and Arlene Violet, I'm Tim White. If you missed any of the episodes, you can catch it on our website, WPRI.com. We'll see you next week on Newsmakers.